Okay, so when evaluating the horse's back, we've got withers, vertebrae, ribs, and sacrum that all ties in together. So if there's soreness anywhere in those regions, you've got soreness throughout the entire back. So what we'll do, I kind of worked on her withers already, but she's still got some wither stuff going on. So we'll get that there, and then the vertebrae here. What I'm gonna do first to kind of just release the back a little bit and make sure that there's nothing really kind of kinked up. There's a soft spot right about here on both sides of the pelvis, or on both sides of the sacrum. And what I'm gonna do is that'll drop the pelvis down and open it up, and it stretches that entire back here. And then I'll come down to about here and raise the pelvis up, and in doing that, it'll cat her back up and get all of this here to stretch out and release. So I like to do that first. You want to be careful standing to the side, just so that if they kick, you're kind of in a safer zone. So I'm going to go ahead and just press in slowly. I don't want to really jab her and scare her, but I want to do it slow enough to where she's not going to kick me, but fast enough to where it's still getting the release. So right there. She gets a little bit grouchy, so they may get grouchy and kick. Just watch yourself. So I'm going to come down to this point right here, and she did have a little pelvic release in there. Nothing really throughout the spine in there. I come down in here. How's this? Ho. 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 Oh. And so we got a pretty good little pop in through the lumbar section in here. So next thing, I'll come back up to the withers here, retest the withers, and that stretch actually took the rest of the soreness that was in those withers out. If they still have soreness throughout there, they've got 5 withers that come up through here, right behind that shoulder blade. And what happens is they'll get knocked off a balance like this and like this. So what I like to do is raise up their belly, and that opens those vertebrae up and then resets them and sets them back down. So I'll just kind of raise her belly up, and she gets pretty grouchy with this. There. She's just kind of a grouch anyways. So then we'll go in and recheck. And there's a little bit of stuff going on right there at the last wither coming into the vertebrae. Oh, right there. Okay. So rechecking the withers. Withers are solid. Muscles have no spasm throughout them. They're pretty good. So next I'm going to go into the vertebrae. And from this side, I'm going to check the left side or the right side, and from that side I'll check the left side. It's just easier because what I like to do to actually get an accurate tell of what's going on in that vertebrae is I like to push my fingers in and actually have the tip of my finger going straight down, so it's not flat and just pressing down into muscle. It's actually getting down into the muscle and hitting the bone. So what I'll do is I'll come in through here, check the vertebrae. Easy. And with her actually popping her butt up, she actually adjusted the vertebrae in itself. So it's kind of, I don't really have to do anything there now. But in general, if you have a vertebrae that's out, what I'll do is I'll put pressure until I feel that muscle release, and then I'll bring the vertebrae back over this way, and I'll just kind of pick it up and roll it back over. And that usually gets the vertebrae right there. Let me do the other side here. Just stay on that side so you can see there. We'll just come right in through here. And I'm testing each individual vertebrae, and you can kind of feel them, but you just kind of want to run your fingers down the back and just down the side of the spine there. And they'll tell you if anything's out. She's got a spot here, so I'm gonna, there. Recheck, always recheck your work. It just makes sure that everything's staying good and that you got it. So next thing, vertebrae are good. Now next thing I'm gonna do is go through the ribs. The best place to check the ribs is about a hand's length away from the spine. So if you just come to the side of the spine and then throw it hands down, your ribs come right through there. And then once you hit those last few ribs, that last section of those few ribs, you kind of start to get your lumbar ties in right here with your ribs. So what I like to do is once I start to hit that spot, I'll come down to get those last few ribs. She's got a couple ribs there. But if I stay up here too high, then I get to hitting lumbar, and she could be testing positive for lumbar and not technically rib. So come through here. So once I find a rib that's out, technically, she'll probably kick. What I'll do is check for flexion throughout the entire rib. So I'll press and hold, flexing's good. So it's not impinged in that certain area. So I'll check here. It's about right there that she's impinged. I'm gonna come down just a little bit lower than what it's impinged. I'm gonna hold pressure on that rib until I feel it soften. There, and then I'm gonna drag it up. And go back and recheck my work. And the muscle may be in a little bit of spasm, so I like to just kind of rub through that muscle, and that way we make sure that we get the rib plus the muscle there. And the reason that I hold pressure on that rib is so that it's getting the muscles, the fascia, the ligaments, anything that's combined in with that rib being out of place. It helps to release all of that, so you get a good strong release that most of the time is not going to come back out of place. She's got this last rib out here. These last few ribs right here are floating ribs, so they're not actually attached to the sternum. So they're quite a bit more ouchier whenever you get to adjusting them, so you really want to watch yourself. Hold pressure, release, pressure, release. This is where it's at. So I'm going to hold pressure. How's this? How's this? Hold pressure, feel it release, and then drag it up. Recheck my work. Much better. And now that muscle's clean, it's flowing smoothly, there's no impingement on the ribs at all or anything like that. So she's pretty happy there. Next, I'm going to go through the lumbar. Now you've got 5 lumbar that come through here. Each individual one comes underneath the vertebrae, and it protects your vital organs underneath the spine. So when they come out of place, each one of them will rock this way or rock that way. So it's not like with the vertebrae they can kind of just move all over the place and impinge on both sides, or a lot of cases drop down or up, or they can do all kinds of different stuff. But the lumbar themselves, they rock one way or the other, so it can't be out on both sides. What I like to do is, there's that soft spot right here on that hip. So what I'll do is go to the other side in the soft spot and just kind of hold that spot there, not putting any pressure just yet. There's 3 areas that I like to test for those lumbar coming down. One's about right here, and right here. So I'm gonna test lumbar. She's got one right there. So what I'll do is I'll hold that spot, and then I'm gonna kind of make like a seesaw motion and raise this pelvis up and then drop that bone down. So right there. And it's a pretty easy transition for them. It's not going to be very brutal. It's not going to be like really popping and grinding in there. So they tend to settle down whenever you're doing this method. So that took care of that line. She's got another one right there. Hostess. Don't be grumpy. Same thing. Gonna hold pressure. There.
Grumpy mare.
Yeah. Go back, check your work, and nothing. So she cleaned up. So I'm gonna go back and check everything all the way through, and everything's really clean. So the next thing to check is the sacrum. Now your sacrum are vertebrae that are fused together, but they still flex and bend. What happens a lot of times is if they stop real hard and you're roping a steer and they really take a jerk, that sacrum a lot of times will lock down. So what happens when that sacrum locks is it pulls on that entire spine. So that could be some of the soreness in itself too. There's two ways that I'll do it if I can't really get a release one way or the other. One way is to, which I'm not going to do on her because she will definitely kick my head off. But you come down about halfway over her butt there, about halfway between here and the tailbone. Come down to about right there, and I'll actually put my elbow down in that spot, and a lot of times I'll step up on something to get this done so that I'm out of harm's way. But I'll put my elbow down in that spot and just kind of hold it there, massage it around a little bit, put some pressure, and then it'll actually release, and you'll see how that whole sacrum just opens back up. The other way that I like to do it is go into each individual vertebrae themselves, and I'll grab both sides of the vertebrae, press until it sinks down and release. Press, sink down, and release. So, Skittles, look out. Go back. So I'll just come right over the top of her here. Release, release. Okay. Release. And in doing that right there, this actually released even more. So it's just kind of proof that this is still tied into everything up in here. And how you tell if the sacrum is locked is you should be able to get a hold of the sacrum and there be some kind of flexion there. If you cannot get any flexion out of that, that means that the sacrum's locked. So I think that's about it as far as getting a full back to release. If you still feel like you're not totally getting ribs completely, what I'll do is I'll actually come underneath the whole rib cage, grab the whole rib cage side and side. I'll come up and just lift that whole rib cage up and try and push it over basically, but it'll reset those entire ribs there. And that cleaned everything up. So there you go.